It's going to be great. It's going to be the best video ever.
It might not.
It's going to be the best video we've done.
We're learning here.
La 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 la.
Hey, my name's Josh, MRJ, Mr. J.
And my name is Brian 2.0.
We are going to be doing a short and sweet video today about a single topic, hint there as to what it will be. And that's based upon your feedback. We know that the last video that we did together was too long. An hour is too long. But we also want to provide some in-depth, not fully scripted content.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be short. And we look forward to it. And with that, we're going to jump right in. We have a topic today that is on our hearts and minds from our recent work, but also it's just been a passion of yours, I think, as part of the solid principles and just general architecture principles. I like how you focus on the underlying foundations. So we're going to pick one little tiny piece of that today and go over it as it relates to our recent work. In 1972, 6 years before I was born, David L. Parnas wrote a big, long article title. Okay. The title was On the Criteria to be Used in Decomposing Systems into Modules.
Decomposing systems into modules.
Yes, and what we're getting to here today is the concept of single responsibility principle. And so we're traveling back in time to look at some of the first parts of that. I found this from an article from Uncle Bob, Robert Martin, and he referenced this as being one of the first mentions of this principle, kind of the fertile foundings.
David Parnas's paper?
Yes, okay. Thank you. And in that paper, we pulled out a small snippet. Actually, we pulled out what Uncle Bob pulled out. He states, we propose instead that one begins with a list of difficult design decisions or design decisions which are likely to change, emphasis on which are likely to change. Each module is then designed to hide such a decision from the others. So you hear about that encapsulation and abstraction to, or decoupling to areas where the reasons to change are similar.
If you have a system then, and it's this big unit of things, you're saying that modules, how did he put it? So you have a system, and then the system has parts of it which are likely to change and this is decomposing, right? So this is all together, and then you decompose or break apart the aspects of the system that are likely to change and hide the decisions about how they change from each other. Yeah. And that's the encapsulation, right?
The way I like to I've heard a lot of people say that you draw or you establish seams between, and you make those seams carefully, so that you've got these nice seams between that hides just enough from each other, but still allows them to work together.
Right. So if I'm module A and you're module B, I know all about the internals of module A, but I only let you know about a small 1, 2, 3. Maybe it's not a number, but I only let you know about the important things that I want to let you know about. Right. And that way, if I have to change anything internally, then it doesn't affect you if you rely on me.
You're exposing an API in this fertile landscape. I tried to make that funnier than it was. It didn't come out right.
For those of you that don't know, the word of the day is fertile.
What was the question of the day before you get into the Uncle Bob?
Oh, we had a question? We didn't write it down.
If you have a domain name, tell us about your domain names that you have. What's the term when you
parked?
Yeah, you've sat on it. If you've got a domain name that you bought thinking somebody else might want it and you want to sell it, or it's just funny, you thought it would be funny. One recently at work that a coworker and I were talking about getting was bobswaffles.com or Bob's anything, funniest thing we could think of. So if you have one, put it in the comments. We'd love to hear about it. We will all visit it if it's work appropriate. and would love to hear that. So
I have some interesting ones. I'll share. I do. I'll share just one though, in the interest of time. Maybe I can share one every week because I have so many interesting ones. Just kidding. I was able to get ilovescrum.com.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. For those that don't know what Scrum is, it's begging to be clicked on.
And it's parked, so there's no content there.
You should put a little bit of you should put a little bit.
Should have it redirect to my own homepage.
So, Brian, that was 1972, 6 years before I was born, in the fertile 70s, when there was a lot of fertile software design architecture principles coming to life. You are more familiar with the writings and teachings of Uncle Bob, Robert Martin. So tell us about how what happened after the 70s.
Okay. For those of you that are not familiar, Uncle Bob, as he's called in the software industry, his name's Robert Martin, and he's written a couple seminal books, really good books on software architecture and design. Clean Code was one that made a big impression on me, and The Clean Coder, Clean Code is about software design, and The Clean Coder is about being a software professional.
Let's link to those books in the show notes. So below the video, check it out.
Awesome.
You might notice that Ryan and I are a little bit more intimate today, and that's because we are trying out my new camera that's a little bit less wide than this one, depending on which one you're seeing.
Yeah.
So we have to get closer.
I'm leaning in.
And we might be cropped too, so apologies.
I read that book, Lean In.
Oh, nice.
And, then I came to this episode filming.
So Clean Code, Clean Coder, and Uncle Bob worked on these.
So that's who Uncle Bob is, but he also helped formalize this idea of solid design principles, and solid is an acronym. I'm not going to go over the whole acronym right now.
They're difficult.
Today's subject is the S in solid, which is single responsibility. And Josh is going to explain to us what single responsibility means.
Oh, I am. I will try to do that, and I think maybe we'll get to that when we show the code.
We can cut in right here.
Yeah.
Like you can read the formal one and just cut in and edit it in, right?
Sure, but let me try. I can't do it. This, I finally found it right here, Uncle Bob, and we will link this in the show notes as well below in the comments. Click on them. The single responsibility SRP states that each software module should have one and only one reason to change.
All right, so let's take a look at our code.
Oh, yeah, and
we're going to go to the past and show you the code we've been working on in the videos, and we're going to illustrate and highlight how single responsibility has played a role in the changing design decisions that we've made.
We could have a segment here where we get into the GitHub time machine, and we do the whole sound effect in the background.
Ooh.
And it looks like we're spinning or something.
And it's GitHub?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, it's the GitHub time machine because that's how we go back in time.
I'm not familiar with it, but I get it. I'm not familiar. I was thinking the GitHub time machine was a real thing.
No,
Okay.
it's a made up thing just now that we will use. But before we do, we have a new sponsor today. This sponsor is actually myself, sort of.
Don't say that.
Okay, this sponsor is halfdomephoto.com, and this comes from a photo taken from a person who had recently moved to California. Actually, just days after moving to California, this person.
Is that Half Dome right there?
That is Half Dome that we're looking at right now.
It's so beautiful.
This person woke up at 3:30 a.m., just literally a few days after moving to California, while he was waiting for his family to move down, drove 3.5 hours to Yosemite on July 4th. So one of the busiest days of the year to go to Yosemite. But fortunately got there early enough to park right at the trailhead and walk up Glacier View, the 4-mile trail to Glacier View, lookout point place that you can also drive to.
I think Glacier Point is what they call it.
Yeah, thank you. Glacier Point. And took this photo. So this photo is 5 photos vertically taken, stitched together, and each of those 5 photos is 3 exposures merged together as HDR. So this photo is taken from a Nikon that has 24 megapixels, 5 of them with HDR tonality merged together. Doing a horrible job of explaining this.
If you know photography, you would love that. And if you don't worry about it. How big can you print this
All
thing?
that to say that this would be a wonderful, clear, crisp print at 90 inches wide. And
on a canvas. You can print this
on metal, on a canvas.
Metal.
Yeah.
So you can order prints of this on halfdomephoto.com?
Don't judge too much the bottom of this. I spent most of the time. Oh, it's the person who took this.
Yeah.
Spent most of their time on the top part in this CSS animation. But yes, this is a 3:1 ratio. I've got a couple of examples. The photographer has a couple of examples here, and the photographer really wants to sell somebody the 90:30 so that the photographer can see it first before it's delivered. And there's a special deal going on right now that it's just very slightly above at cost. So buy this. Go to halfdomephoto.com.
It's pretty exciting.
And buy this, yeah. You will.
Thank you, Half Dome Photo, for sponsoring our show.
Man, it's wonderful to get sponsors. We love sponsors, and we sponsor. I don't know. Don't show that yet. All right, so we're going to get into the GitHub Time Machine. In fact, we have already done that. We have traveled back in time to the blob of this hash.
So the SHA that starts with 7A4589
and ends with CBF 926.
If you're following along.
And it's fun to go back in time sometimes to see where you were and where you ended up.
This is the original add phones to page function, right, Josh?
It is. Brian, what do you notice about this, given that we have 5 minutes left?
Okay, let's do this.
In our time box.
So the original add phones to page is doing a couple things. You can see on line 38 that Firebase is being invoked and it's registering a callback function. Inside that callback function, it's getting the users that Firebase gave us, and then it's looping through those, and it's using document.createElement. So it's creating an element, and then it's adding a class to the element. It's updating the attributes, and then it's appending that element to the body. And after that, it's building a collection of phone elements. When the loop ends, it calls init DB listener.
Brian, do you think that this file right now has some good seams in the middle where modules have single responsibilities?
I believe when we started this that we only had index.js. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So I'm going to say no to modules because, we had an auth.
We had one, yeah. This was the first abstraction, the first decoupling that was made. We pulled out the auth. I pulled out the auth. But yeah, at this point, everything else was in one.
So that's one area where auth is a responsibility on its own.
But this part. I was looking for you to say no.
Okay. Well, what I noticed and what we noticed as we started testing this was the dependencies. And the dependencies showed us that this function was doing more than one thing. Rather than doing more than one thing, we were talking, and it's almost like it was, not it's almost like, rather than doing one thing, we realized it's responsible, and this is a subtle distinction, for the implementation details of multiple things. That being creating a phone element, and it's adding it to the page, which means we have a dependency on the document and all of the things for creating the element, which is usually a browser concern. And it's calling initDB listener too, but it's not responsible for the details of the initDB listener. It does appear that it's also dependent on Firebase directly. And so add phones to page is a verb. We're adding them to the page, but we're also creating that element here. And so that is what indicates it's doing more than one thing. We've got the verb of adding them to the page. So we need add, we need phones, and we need a page. So our testing uncovered that it was hard to test because we had dependencies.
Yeah.
And by extracting only the phone responsibilities out to a phone module, which means the phone module only has phone reasons to change, we created a new module. And that module has a single responsibility. It's responsible for phones at this point.
My new goal in life is to only write functions and modules in which a developer that comes in a month later can read it and understand immediately what it does.
Yeah, and real quick, the code smell for this, when you guys open up your code base, it's legacy code base, if you have a class or you have a file that has 10,000 lines of code or even 2,000 lines of code in it,
That's more like a code stink.
There's very clear indicator that things can be separated out into individual responsibilities, and implementation details can be hidden behind those responsibilities, and APIs can be exposed and it makes life better for everybody. The primary reason that's outlined in the theory is the software becomes easier to change. And so this is really important because it's maintenance costs of writing software.
Yes.
It's time to market of writing software.
For the next feature, yeah.
Yeah. So there's real value here that's often hard to communicate and is hard to become tangible to business people and whatnot. But it's really important, and it makes your life easier as well when you're a software engineer and you can have a new requirement, go into a code base, make the change in a pretty straightforward manner.
This is illustrated by the fact that we've now spent hours trying to tease this out in order to test it, when I could have been spending those hours building new features, which I want to for this. I just wanted to make sure that before I started adding features, it was in a place to be testable and to be easy to change and maintain.
And so while Josh switches to our current code, we get multiple benefits here. We get tests, so when we do make changes, we know that those changes are what we expect, and we know, more importantly, we didn't break something else in the code base, in the system. The second thing is we get an improved software design that makes it easier to change and more flexible.
So this is beautiful. Look at phone.js, which is a module which we have decoupled from the main app. We've drawn this beautiful seam. It's not a perfect seam, but we've drawn this seam between the care and concern of the main app and this area, which has a somewhat single reason to change regarding the phone.
Everything in the phone module has to do with the phone.
Yeah.
And we've got two functions. We've got create a phone element and we've got create a phone. We made the decision to make a phone an object because it's got value and data and state that's going to change.
Right.
But more importantly, to the add phones to page, we made a create phone element, which has 4 lines 4 through 7, that are responsible for creating that element and returning it.
And, this is really quick and easy to read, to see what's going on. We can see that it's creating divs there and it's managing the object here. Where the true value is even more seen is in the test. Now we get into the test, and you get, in order to test that module, you only need to import it and none of its dependencies. And
that was a problem we were having. To import that one, or to test that one function, we had to import pretty much everything that the app relied on. We needed Firebase, we needed document, we needed we needed to rely on the implementation details inside of init DB change as well.
Yeah, DB Chandler.
That's right.
We also don't see any spies or mocks. Not that those are bad, and those are I keep looking at this camera instead of this one. And those are very appropriate in lots of situations. But it is much better, for me, it's a little bit easier to have everything with nice seams in between them.
Well, the idea is,
coupled.
If it's a phone, it doesn't need to mock anything because you can have a phone without having Firebase.
Yeah, exactly. So
All that's to say,
Yeah.
we've created a module. It's got one responsibility. That enabled us to write tests that were easier to write, easier to understand. It enables us to change things about the phone without affecting the rest of the software.
With reckless abandon. Maybe not the right phrase, but
I love that phrase.
With
refactor with reckless abandon.
We have little fear in breaking the whole app, in changing the portions of that decoupled module.
And before we go, can we look at the add to phones function, the updated one?
Sure. That's in our main app. There's definitely still some work to be done here, but let's look at a few things. First of all, we're injecting this so that it's not the concern of this function. But then walk us through how it looks now and go for it.
Okay. The updated add phones to page function still has to have a phone element, right? But this was the subtle distinction we were talking about earlier, is that the responsibility of the details of how a phone element is created is now moved into the phone module. So the phone module has the responsibility and of how that's created, which means if we change how a phone element is created, then we change the phone module. We don't change add phones to page. You can have a phone element without having a page, and you can have it without adding it to a page. That's that separation of responsibility. And this, what it looks like is add phones to page still creates the phone element, but it uses the public API. So it doesn't have to know about those implementation details. And that goes back to the original definition that we started with of you take the design decisions that are likely to change and you separate them out into modules that hide the decisions about change from each other.
If you like this approach where we haven't actually written a single line of code, but we've reviewed what we have done and applied software architecting principle to it and talked through the principle, will you let us know?
Yeah, it's a little bit different of a format, and we'd love the feedback.
Yeah, so if you found this valuable, and would like us to do it again, comment below, or just, do the easy thing. Just click like.
Yeah, definitely. Josh and I get really excited when we see new subscribers and when we get feedback in the comments. It really helps us out and with new ideas, and it helps us keep this going and makes us want to improve and get better at creating content for you guys. So I want to add that if any of this was unclear about single responsibility, or if you have anything to add, if you'd like to see more design principles, anything like that, let us know, please.
Yes, definitely, please. And you by clicking the subscribe button, you might be the 1 millionth subscriber.
That's actually true.
You
could be watching this 5 years from now.
It is possible.
Or we could have exponential growth, and you could be watching this 3 months from now.
How exciting
would that be? And be the 1 millionth subscriber.
I can't even imagine how exciting that would be. And even though you see a number much smaller than that, who knows what could happen between that time and when you click the button. I'm excited about the possibilities of that. We would love to bring you back because we're going to keep doing this as long as you want us to, basically.
Quick question.
Yes.
What can they expect in the upcoming episodes?
Well, that's what I was getting to, and that's a fantastic question. We have a few interviews that we are brewing up. One with a friend of Brian's who attended a hackathon with Brian and worked on a project, which I still haven't seen or heard about. I'd love to hear about it, so maybe we'll do that in that interview. We're going to talk to him about how it was, what his experience was. What kind of questions do you want to ask him?
So his name is Eugene, or Yevgeny. He's from Moldavia. And he's a really interesting guy. He's passionate about software engineering. And I'd just like to talk to him about his experience with the hackathon.
Cool.
It was sackhacks.io. He's been to a couple other hackathons, so he's really, like I said, he's passionate about it, and he's passionate about the community, and he's also passionate about open source. So I'm sure he's going to have a lot of interesting things to share with us.
Along with that, I was a part of a boot camp, a 6-month software development boot camp, working in the MERN stack, and I know quite a few of the graduates who I'd love to pull into the show. I'm going to try maybe to get 2 or 3 of them on a Zoom call and talk to them about their experience, what they learned, what their ending project was like, what their prospects are for the future are, and go over those details.
MERN stack. If you don't know what that means, leave a comment and maybe we'll make a video about it.
Sounds very good. Stick around for a few outtakes because we have a few today, and we'll see you next week. I'm Josh.
I'm Brian. And remember to let your children play.
I don't have a saying, so goodbye.
Oh, are we thinking and wondering?
Yeah.
Ready? Let's here, back to back.
It was a fertile time.
The 70s and 80s were a fertile time. I was born in 1983.
I was born in 1978. I feel close to you this morning.
I'm leaning on your chair. It's Mr. J and friend.
It's not expensive, and friend.
I feel like we're in for more fertile years for software development. I'm very serious.
Stop laughing.
It's not a joking matter. It's not funny. Oh, I like pooples. That makes sense to nobody else but Josh and I right now.
Ooh, I like pooples.
Object destructuring of pooples.
What
I feel like my brain's not awake. This morning we need to get the juices flowing here.
What if we did FreshBooks? Because I've used FreshBooks before.
Oh, you know what? I don't know what FreshBooks is.